So this part of their life takes place in Iowa, and it was only 1 year. It's not talked about at all in Laura Ingalls Wilder's books, but they do kind of cover it in the TV show Little House on the Prairie in season 5. All right, so we've made it over to the little town of Burr Oak, and the Ingalls ended up out here because if you saw any of our other videos, you know when they were in Walnut Grove, unexpectedly, they ended up with this horrific infestation of grasshoppers, or that's what Laura called it. They say it was probably locusts, and it basically just made farming for 2 years completely impossible. So Charles got offered a job to come over to this little hotel over here, the Masters Hotel, and run that. So that's basically what happened. They moved the whole family here and into that hotel, and they ran it for about a year, but they ended up deciding that this town just wasn't really for them. Apparently Carolyn just didn't really like living that kind of a lifestyle, having the kids there. So Laura doesn't talk about it in her books at all. When we took that amazing tour in De Smet, they told us that this was actually when Laura was writing the books. This year in particular was not really a great year in Laura's life, and so she just decided to omit it because the family went from Walnut Grove to here and then back to Walnut Grove. She thought maybe it would confuse people, so she just didn't write about it. But in the autobiography they put together of her writings, she does talk about it in there. Now, it does end up coming up in the television show, Little House on the Prairie. Kind of cool to see this because they did tell us that this is the only location in Ingalls history that is on its original foundation. So very cool. But in the TV show, season 5, you see the Garveys and the Olsons and the Ingalls and everybody are off in Winoka, I think is what they, Winoka or Wakota, something like that. And they're working at the Dakota. And they're there because Mary has gotten a job as a teacher. And so the whole family and everybody is there trying to start a new life. But in the, what is it, like episode 5 or 6, they end up realizing it's not going to work out, and then somebody lets off fireworks, so they all end up going back to Walnut Grove, and Mary stays there in town and is a teacher, and eventually, you know, decides that she's going to get married, and so the family comes back here to see her for the wedding, and then she decides she doesn't want to get married because the Ingalls start kind of like reminiscing about how much trouble Mary was as a child, and she starts realizing with 2 blind parents, the times they talked about her running off in the wild and running through the snow a half mile, and before they realized she was gone, that really could be a problem if they had kids. We've seen a lot of Ingalls locations together. This one I think will be a lot of fun. I don't know if we can film inside or what, but they do have it set up the way it was back in the time that they were here for that brief year. What are you expecting to see today, Katie? We've seen a lot of cool stuff, and you know a lot of the history of this place as well, too.
I think it'll be interesting. This place is kind of, like you said, described as that little missing piece in between the storybooks of the banks of Plum Creek and then the shores of Silver Lake. So a lot of stuff happened with the family. This is right around the time when baby Grace was born.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, they did lose a child kind of around this time. So I can understand why Laura may have kind of glazed over this part of her story, but at the same time, it's kind of neat to see them somewhat bring it back for the show. But at the same time, this is one of the places they ended up. So there's going to be some history around here. So we're in the business of checking that out, aren't we?
Yeah. and people have been loving these videos.
These have been really, really fun. This is really cool history. I mean, we've been able to see artifacts that belong to the family. I'm hoping we'll see more of that today. The fact that the structure is original foundation is absolutely cool. So it's kind of the cherry on top for us.
Katie's absolutely right. That's a great point that she brought up. During this time is when baby Grace was born, and there was a Charles Jr. that was born and didn't survive, and they lost him during the times that they would have been here. Laura would have been 9 years old when they lived here, but on the television show, if you remember when they came here, that's when Charles meets Albert and decides to ask Albert to come back to Walnut Grove so he can go to school, and they adopt Albert for the show. To take this tour, you have to start over at the visitor center across the street, which is the original bank here in town. Here's the visitor center, and they do have a fun pick opportunity if you're into that kind of stuff. The original family, not the TV show family. All right, this should be fun. I'm excited. Another place the Ingalls lived.
The second time the Ingalls lived in Walnut Grove, the family continued to experience poor luck. At the age of 14, Laura's oldest sister Mary became very ill with brain fever and lost her vision, rendering her permanently blind.
Grace was born here. Cool. All right, so along this wall we have a few photos. We have the original state of the Masters Hotel, and then right before the restoration. There was an addition added onto it when the house was a residence. Unfortunately, that's not accurate, so they made it go away. Next to that is the town and a map of the town, and then the house where Grace was born and a church. And then if we're ready, we can head on in there. And the oldest son, Johnny. We have a drawing of Johnny because Laura talked about him pretty extensively in our segment of Pioneer Girl. Because he was a little whippersnapper. He was just a mean little boy. He would torment Laura. Next to them are Dr. and Mrs. Starr. They were a well-to-do family in town. And he was a pretty interesting guy, but he was picked on pretty relentlessly. And one day he had enough. One of the biggest bullies, Moise, he was just a mean little boy. And so Mr. Reed came prepared for class. He tied a rope to his ankle and the leg of his desk. He asked Moise to come over and stuck out his leg and tripped him, bent him over the knee, and gave him a few spankings. Mr. Reed was never bothered again. So that is some of the rules for teachers. One of the more interesting rules is for women, courting once a week was allowed, and for men, courting twice a week, but only if you were in good standing with the church. Mr. Reed was hired. Furthest from me on this wall is some needlework done by Laura herself, calling card. Then in the glass case, everything on the top shelf was actually Laura's and was donated by Mansfield. Wow. Everything below is a recreation or a first edition copy. And then here next to me, we have a letter from Laura written to some local children about 20 miles down the road. And then if you're ready, we can head on into the parlor.
These are all Laura's belongings. These are all made by Laura. And this was the Stedman room, friends of the Ingalls. Their family slept in here. And that's them.
This is the room for one person. Upstairs was the room for the guests and the Ingalls. During the long long, hard winter. They're looking pretty rough there. They're in their 40s. Pa was born in Cuba, New York. Ma in Brookfield, Wisconsin. There is a plaque there for her. I go to college over by there. Plug for Brookfield. And then over by the organ, we have Mary, Carrie, and Laura during the long, hard winter. Kitty corner from that is Grace. We're not exactly sure why Grace is in her separate photo. There's a few possible reasons. Number one, she was sick. Number two, it was a long, hard winter. Number two, they wanted a baby photo, so they took her photo at an earlier date, and it was just too expensive to have all of them together. And number three, Grace just wasn't available to sit still for so long. Toddlers are finicky. She was pretty interesting. She had a pretty good life and went to college, and she was there for a really long time. She would have learned math, writing, arithmetic, reading, and a few other skills that she could have used to sell things. Underneath the glass case are the records from the school in Vinton, which only closed in 2018. One interesting fact about the records is the Ingalls are noted as moderate. This could have been done for several reasons. Number one, Pa wrote it down and didn't want to be seen as poor. And number two, Mary arrived on the train with two people, her Ma and Pa, and with a new trunk of clothes. They were all hand-sewn clothes, but they were still new clothes. It was made by a local fellow, George Payne Bent, and he was a pretty interesting guy. His father was the reverend at the local church, and him and Laura just missed each other. He wrote a book and traveled around, and then he started making organs.
That's awesome. I always think of that story of Pa being huddled down in the little bunker for 3 days eating the candy.
Yeah.
Oyster crackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, would not have been my preferred use of 3 days.
Wow, this is so cool. The Bisbee room.
That is not Paz. Paz is in Mansfield.
Oh, it's in Mansfield.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So this room was the room of Mr. Bisbee. He was a well-to-do man in town, and he was a pretty interesting guy. He got it into his head to teach Laura how to sing, and she was not interested in that. It cut into her playtime. So she was not very happy with Mr. Bisbee. He also owned the house that Grace was born in, and Pa owed him some money, and nobody was very happy about that. So Pa and Mr. Bisbee had a conversation, talked it over, and they decided that Pa would pay back all of the money and not go back to Walnut Grove. Pa was not happy about that. Pa wanted to go to Walnut Grove and get a big boy job. And so he packed up all his stuff and he left in the middle of the night. The ropes, and shake out all the bugs from the hay, and then you can feel the sheepskin coat and the buffalo. And then, I don't know how interesting this is, we do have a narwhal bone cane.
And these are all the places that they lived in, kind of represented. Rocky Ridge Farm. That's where Laura ended up. This is where we are now. The cement. That's a great tour.
Don't hit your head.
Up the stairs.
That's because I'm
This is
a
crazy.
taller than Laura.
A little bed right there.
So up here is the only place where guests would have actually stayed. We have 4 bedrooms up here. This room you're going into now here, sir, would have been Laura's teacher, Mr. Reed's room. He would have gotten his own room because he would have been here not during the busy season, and he would have paid a little bit more for it. And then we have a room with kids' toys in it. Not period accurate, children would have never stayed at hotels, but you know, it's fun. And the dollhouse furthest from me is a recreation of the cabin in Pippin.
Another guest room.
Based on either how it was created or
Wow, they did a great job.
so like a running stitch, you know, it looks like running.
This guy was a stagecoach driver
So
that
the
they interviewed.
stagecoach drivers would have gotten to stay in this bed here for free because they brought in customers.
Oh, this one at the top?
Yeah.
Hey,
I thought that was a child's bed.
No, children in hotels.
oh my word.
And
Really?
yeah,
Oh my gosh.
it would not have been very fun. And then
Those
that dress you're
belong
looking
to
at right now,
them.
sir, is a wedding dress. worn by a local woman, a Fister is her name. And then over.
Now we're going down. So at this point, they told me to stop filming. That they had asked earlier if I had asked if I could film, and I did ask before we bought the tickets. They told me that I could do photography. So at this point, they told me not to, but that I could take photos. So when we got down here, this was where anyone that was staying in the hotel would eat, and Carolyn Ingalls would actually make all the food for everyone. So this room down here would have been open 6 days a week for 3 meals a day, and anybody that was staying there could eat there. And she would also do their laundry. You could pay to have the laundry done. So these are a lot of the plates and dishes and things that she would have used to prepare the meals, and just some examples. And they had articles about things in their life, like that big grasshopper swarm. And this is how the place settings and everything would have looked. And this room would have been the original entrance, they said, to come in from the ground floor. And there would have been a typical menu with prices and what they would have normally had on those days. And just some different instruments of the time period. Now, as we went down here, the room to the left was the Ingalls bedroom. The whole family stayed in there. That would have been Ma and Pa's room. They also could take a bath here. And there you can see what the prices for her doing the laundry were. But the mom and pa would stay on the top bed, and then the bottom bed would pull out. There's the family. And all 3 daughters would have stayed on that little pull-out bed that you can see under there. I don't know why they're so crazy about filming and you can do photos, but this was kind of cool to see their room. Surprising to see how small it really was for the whole family to be in that one room. Now this was where Carolyn would have done the cooking. She would have stored goods in there. There's the weekly schedule. And then this is what she would have had to cook on. While being pregnant, no less. Think of that. She was doing all of this work 6 days a week. Cleaning, cooking for everyone in the hotel and everything, and was pregnant with Grace. But apparently there was a fire in the hotel, and the hotel, that's when the Ingalls decided to leave. They've kept a pretty good job of showing what it was like at the time, though. Well, that was a pretty fun tour. As you could see, about halfway through, they came and told me, oh, no, we don't want you to film anything. So I had to stop halfway through, but it's definitely worth checking out. A lot of people don't know about this stop, you know, especially if you were just a fan of the books and you didn't read about it in the books. It's definitely worth checking out because, you know, they spent quite some time here. And this is called Laura's Bell. This is the bell they called the Ingalls to the Burr Oak Congregational Church. 1876 and 1877. When the church was closed, the bell was purchased by the Hesper Friends Meeting House and donated back to the museum. So part of the story as to why they left here was they said that Pa owed some money, but that the place caught on fire. So they left after it caught on fire. Well, what did you think? I loved seeing the basement, even though that's where they kind of cut off us being able to film. They were telling us that down there is where basically Carolyn had to cook for the entire hotel.
Yeah, pregnant.
Yeah, pregnant no less. So she would have made everybody's food and done all the laundry and all that stuff there.
3 meals a day, every day but Sunday.
Yep.
And then they had their room down there too. They all shared this teeny tiny room, and they had a great little story about how they wanted to have the kids come over from town because the family ended up with the measles. So
yeah,
it was
all
about it. Yeah, all
Christmas.
about exposure. So they said the children would come and play in hopes that they would get exposed to measles.
Yep.
Isn't that wild?
Pretty crazy. This place is definitely off the beaten path, so a lot of people I think don't know about it, but if you can make it here, it's definitely worth checking out, because like I said, it's the only place that's on its original foundation for any of the home sites. So plus, if you're a fan of the show, you can see where the fictitious Dakota Hotel really was. It was the Masters right there. All right, my friends, if you're a fan of Laura Ingalls Wilder or Little House on the Prairie, I hope you enjoyed this. We have enjoyed seeing all the sites that we've gotten to see. Have a great night from Burr Oak, Iowa. Have a wonderful day, and make it out here to see these places while you still can. Who knows, you know, sometimes museums close out of nowhere, so come see it. Have a great night and goodbye.